Okay, so you know that feeling, right? Like when you're just like, all right, that's it. I'm going to get my act together.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Finally going to start hitting the gym, meditate every single day,
Hmm.
like eat actual healthy food.
Oh, sure, for sure.
And in that moment, it feels totally doable, right? Like you're on fire, you're motivated.
Yeah, you're like, this is it. This is the time.
This time it's going to stick. But then, well, life just kind of
It
happens.
happens every time.
Motivation fizzles out, and suddenly you're back to doing the same old things.
It's the worst.
And meanwhile, those habits you actually really want to ditch,
Yeah.
like the endless scrolling on your phone or reaching for the chips when you're not even hungry.
Or putting off that one thing you know you absolutely have to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's like those habits have this iron grip on us.
It's like they're impossible to shake.
And this is such a common experience, right?
Yeah.
But it really gets to the heart of why actually changing our behavior, like really making those changes stick, is so hard.
Totally. I mean, that initial enthusiasm is definitely important. You need that to get started. But if we're talking about real, lasting change, well, we've got to dig a little deeper.
Exactly. And that's precisely what we're doing today. We're diving deep into why breaking those bad habits and building good ones can feel like, well, like climbing Mount Everest.
Absolutely.
And for this deep dive, we're focusing on that first really important idea from Chapter 2 of the research you sent.
Yeah, chapter 2 goes right to the core of why we often struggle with habits. It suggests that a lot of the time, when we try to make these changes, we're aiming at the wrong thing completely.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay, so we're going after the wrong target. I'm intrigued.
Right. So, to understand this better, the chapter introduces this framework of three different levels of change. It's almost like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Ooh, okay. I like that analogy, the layers of an onion. So walk us through those layers. What are they?
So, the outermost layer, the one we usually see first, is called outcome change. This is basically all about those results we want to achieve. Think of classic New Year's resolutions. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to get that promotion.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So the tangible stuff, the things we can check off a list, most of our goals live at this level, right?
Exactly. It's about what we want to see happen, the end result.
Gotcha. All right, so what's the next layer then, just underneath that outcome level?
So, peeling back that outer layer, we find the process change level. This one's all about the habits and systems we put in place to actually reach those
Okay,
outcomes.
so this is where the how-to comes in.
Exactly. So, for that lose weight goal, maybe it's starting a new workout plan or prepping meals ahead of time. For write a book, maybe it's blocking out specific time each day for writing.
Right, it's about getting specific and figuring out the steps.
Right, the actual steps and actions. And a lot of those, practical tips you see about building habits tend to focus on this process level.
Got it. Makes sense. So we've got the what, the outcome,
Hmm.
the how, the process. I'm guessing the core of this onion is the why.
You got it. And this is where it gets really interesting. The deepest layer, the one at the heart of it all, is identity change.
Identity change. Okay, now we're getting philosophical.
A little bit, yeah,
Yeah.
but it's super important. This level is all about changing your core beliefs. Your sense of self, the assumptions you hold about yourself and the world.
So this feels a lot deeper than just wanting to like run a 5K or start a new morning routine. It's about who we believe we are at our core, right?
Exactly. And chapter 2 makes this really powerful point that to build habits that actually last, habits that become part of you, you have to start at this deepest level with identity.
So instead of just saying, I want to work out 3 times a week, I'd first need to think, what kind of person consistently makes exercise a priority?
Precisely. It's about shifting your focus from just the behavior to the kind of person you want to be.
Okay, so that brings us to the difference between outcome-based habits and identity-based habits, right, Bowen?
Mm.
The book had a good example about this with cigarettes.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. So imagine two people who are trying to quit smoking. Someone offers them a cigarette, and the first person says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit."
Right. Pretty standard response.
Exactly. But there's a subtle message there. It suggests that this person still sees themselves as a smoker, but they're making a conscious effort to stop.
Yeah, they're still holding on to that smoker identity, even though they're trying to change their behavior.
Right. Now, the second person, when offered a cigarette, they say, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker."
Interesting. So it's a small change in wording, but it feels different.
Right. There's a shift there.
Mm,
This person isn't just trying to quit, they've actually changed how they see themselves. Smoking is no longer part of their identity.
that's powerful. It's about changing your inner belief, not just your outer actions.
Exactly. And this is where a lot of people go wrong, you know? They focus so much on the outcome, I want to be slimmer, or the process, I'll follow this specific diet, but they never address their underlying beliefs.
They skip over that whole identity piece.
Mm.
Makes sense, though, right? I mean, everything we do, every system we have, it all comes from our beliefs.
Absolutely. Our beliefs are the foundation. Chapter 2 used the comparison of a democracy versus a dictatorship.
Ooh, okay, big picture stuff now.
Right. But it illustrates the point. A democracy is built on beliefs about individual freedom, the power of the people, right? So things like voting, free speech, those are behaviors that flow naturally from those beliefs.
Whereas a dictatorship operates on completely different beliefs, authority, control, obedience. So democratic behaviors wouldn't really work there. They'd be out of place.
Exactly. And it's the same for us, you know, if we're trying to build habits that are totally misaligned with our self-image, well, it's going to be an uphill battle.
So if I think of myself as someone who's terrible with money, even if I set financial goals and create budgets, deep down, those actions might feel out of sync with who I believe I am.
Right. You might be going through the motions, but it's hard to sustain that if your beliefs are fighting against you.
Chapter 2 had that story about Brian Clark, the nail biter. I loved that one. Could you tell that story again?
Oh, yeah. So Brian had this lifelong nail biting habit. He tried everything to quit, mostly relying on willpower, you know, white knuckling it.
Just forcing himself to stop.
Yeah, and he'd have some success, but it never really lasted. Then he tried something totally different. He asked his wife to schedule him for a professional manicure.
A manicure. To stop biting his nails. I'm not sure I follow that logic.
Right. It seems counterintuitive, but hear me out.
Mm-hmm.
So his initial thought was kind of practical. If he was spending money on his nails, he wouldn't want to ruin them.
Okay, that makes some sense.
But the real magic happened after. His nails looked good for the first time, like really good. And the manicurist even complimented him on how healthy they were. Well, you know, except for the biting damage.
Oh, no.
Right. But here's the thing. That experience sparked something in Brian. He felt proud of his nails. And that pride, it shifted something inside him. He stopped seeing himself as a nail biter and started seeing himself as someone who takes care of his nails. And guess what? He stopped biting them just like that.
Wow, that's amazing. So it wasn't just about the money or avoiding the biting. It was about that shift in his self-image.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it. The most powerful, lasting motivation comes when a habit becomes part of your identity. It's like instead of, I want to be the kind of person who does this, it's, I am this kind of person.
And the book talked about how the more you value something, the more you're going to naturally do the things that support that value.
Okay.
Right? Like if you're proud of your hair, you'll take good care of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Or if you value strength, you'll consistently work out. It becomes less about forcing yourself and more about just doing what feels natural for the kind of person you are.
It's almost like those actions become an expression of who you are, not just something you're trying to achieve.
And that brings us back to that central idea. Real behavior change is identity change.
Yeah.
Motivation can get you going, but it's that shift in your self-perception that keeps you going over the long haul.
So it's less about achieving a specific goal and more about embodying a certain way of being. It's not just about reading a book, it's about becoming a reader, not just finishing a marathon. It's about becoming a runner.
Exactly. You're not just checking things off a list, you're becoming someone. And that's reflected in your actions, even if you're not totally aware of it.
Oh, and there's some research the book mentioned about voting, right?
Yeah. They found that people who saw themselves as voters were way more likely to actually vote than people who just said they intended to vote.
That's fascinating. So it's not just about wanting to do something, it's about who you believe you are in relation to that action.
Exactly. And when your actions and your identity are aligned, doing the right thing, you know, sticking to those good habits, it just feels natural, like it's just part of who you are.
It's less of a struggle, I guess. You're not battling against yourself all the time.
Exactly. However, the book also points out this interesting thing. This whole identity thing, it can kind of be a double-edged sword.
A double-edged sword, what do you mean by that?
So once you really adopt an identity, it can actually make it harder to change, even if it's a change you want.
Okay, so our sense of self can sometimes hold us back from growing.
In a way, yeah. Think about those limiting beliefs people have, you know? I'm terrible with technology. I'm not a creative person. I'm just naturally disorganized.
Yeah, we all got those little voices in our heads.
Right. And the thing is, when we repeat those beliefs over and over for years and years, they become part of how we see ourselves.
So then we might avoid doing things that challenge those beliefs. Like, if I believe I'm not creative, maybe I won't even try painting or writing because it'll feel too scary, too out of character.
Exactly. You end up protecting that belief, even if it's not serving you. It's like there's this pressure to stay consistent with how you see yourself, even if that image isn't really who you want to be anymore.
And the more we connect a thought or action to our identity, the harder it is to change it, right?
Exactly. And that's a major roadblock to growth, whether it's with your health, your relationships, your career, anything. You can understand the benefits of changing, but if it goes against your core identity, it's tough.
So where does all this identity stuff come from in the first place? Are we born with it?
That's a great question. And chapter 2 is pretty clear about this. Our identity actually emerges from our habits. We're not born with these fixed beliefs about ourselves. They're learned and shaped through our experiences, especially through our repeated actions.
Okay, so it's not like we're predetermined to be a certain way. It's more like we become who we are through what we do consistently.
Exactly. Every belief we hold about our abilities, our personality, it all comes from experience.
So that means our habits are the building blocks of our identity.
You could say that, yeah. They're the way we put our identity into action, you know? If you make your bed every morning, you're embodying the identity of an organized person.
Right. And if you write every day, you're living out that writer identity.
Exactly. And the book even got into the etymology of the word identity. It comes from Latin words that mean being and repeatedly. So it's like repeated beingness.
Repeated beingness. I love that. It's a great way to think about it. So basically, our sense of self is built on all the evidence we've gathered through our past habits.
Exactly. If you volunteered a lot, you've got evidence for a compassionate identity. If you always show up when you say you will, you're building evidence for reliability. The more evidence, the stronger the belief.
It's like creating a case file for who you are. And you've talked before about how writing consistently, even when you didn't think of yourself as a writer, gradually shifted your identity.
Yeah, that's a great example. It was the consistent action day after day that built the identity. Of course, successes and failures along the way can influence how we see ourselves, but it's those daily habits that really shape us over time.
So building positive habits is really about consciously becoming the person we want to be.
Exactly. And it's not about some massive overnight transformation. It's more like what the book called microevolutions of the self.
Microevolutions, I like that. It's like we're constantly changing and evolving little by little through our actions.
Right. Each habit is like a tiny suggestion to yourself, like maybe this is who I am. Finish a tough workout. You're resilient. Choose a healthy meal. You prioritize your well-being. Each action is like a vote for that desired identity.
So even those small, seemingly insignificant actions, they're all contributing to this bigger picture of who we are.
Exactly. And that's why big, sweeping changes aren't always necessary. Consistent small habits, those tiny votes, can add up to massive shifts because they're providing evidence for a new way of being. It's like the paradox of how tiny things can make a huge difference.
Okay, so if we want to use our habits to intentionally shape our identity, what's the practical approach? Chapter 2, we had that two-step process, right?
Yeah. It all boils down to this. First, decide who you want to be. And second, prove it to yourself with small wins.
Okay, let's break that down. How do we even begin figuring out who we want to be? That feels like a big question.
It is, but the book suggests starting with your desired outcomes and then working backwards. Ask yourself, who is the type of person that could naturally achieve this? So if you want to be fit, what does a fit person do consistently? If you want to be a great communicator, what habits does a great communicator have?
So it's like reverse engineering the identity from the outcome. Instead of, I want to be more confident, it's what would a confident person do?
Exactly. And that can lead to some powerful self-affirmations, like I'm the kind of friend who's always supportive, or I'm the type of professional who's always prepared.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've identified the kind of person we want to be. Now for that second step, proving it to ourselves.
Right. And this is where those small wins, those consistent actions come in. You got to start taking small steps that align with that identity. The book had this story about someone who lost a lot of weight by constantly asking themselves, what would a healthy person do? And that simple question guided their choices all day long, from choosing to walk instead of drive to picking the salad over the fries.
That's such a cool strategy. It's like they were constantly checking in with that healthy identity and letting it inform their actions.
Exactly. It's like building a case for your new identity, one small win at a time. And this is where that feedback loop comes in, the one we talked about earlier.
Right. Habits shape identity, and identity shapes habits.
Yeah, it's this beautiful cycle. But the key is to let your values, your desired identity, drive the loop, not just the results.
So it's not just about achieving the outcome. It's about letting the process of becoming shape your actions.
Precisely. And ultimately, that's why habits are so powerful. It's not just about getting things done, it's about who we are becoming.
And chapter 2 really drives that point home, right? That identity change is the real key to lasting habit change. It's not about what or how, it's about who.
You got it. And the amazing thing is, our identity isn't fixed. We have the power to change it.
We're not stuck with who we used to be. We can choose who we want to become.
Exactly. Every choice, every action is a chance to reinforce that desired identity. And that's the real beauty of building good habits. It's about becoming someone, about believing in yourself in a deeper way. And ultimately, as the chapter said, we become our habits.
So the big takeaway from our deep dive into chapter 2 today, if we want real lasting change, we got to shift our focus from the things we want to achieve to who we want to be.
Absolutely. And remember, our current habits are constantly shaping our identity, whether we realize it or not.
So that brings us to a question for you, our listener. What are your current habits saying about who you are becoming? Is that the person you truly want to be? Think about that as you go about your day.
And in our future deep dives, now that we've laid this foundation about the power of identity, we'll get into the practical side of things, the specific strategies and techniques for actually building those better habits, for putting this identity change into action.
Because knowing who you want to be is just the first step. Then comes the exciting part, actually becoming that person.
Exactly. And we'll be here to guide you through it.
Thanks for joining us today. Until next time.
See you then.